joining us on another episode of the Fast Performance Podcast. The Fast Performance Podcast, as always, is brought to you by Kaiser, the power in human performance. We appreciate you joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Range is hot.
What's going on, everybody?
Well, hi.
How's it going?
Just lovely.
Yeah. So we were just talking about before. Let me hit record. So we were just talking about before hitting the stream button. Like leading up this year ago, we would have been
this year ago.
A year ago, we were thinking about going to Vegas to play San Diego.
Right.
And COVID wasn't on anybody's radar, and we won't talk about that game.
No, we'll leave that be,
because that was a rough game.
That was a bad game.
But it was still a fun weekend because it was Super Bowl weekend. But COVID was on nobody's radar. And then what were you just saying about Yale lacrosse?
So Yale decided this morning that they're going to forego their season, and it's sounding like a lot of the Ivies are going to follow suit. I didn't see anything about the Ivy Leagues announcing that they're canceling the season, but I just saw while I was working out, I did a quick check on Twitter, and it said that Yale is for sure done.
Brutal. For those who don't know, we've got Dillon the Wall Ward, all-pro.
Aptly known.
Yeah, all-pro lacrosse goalie, indoor, outdoor, gold medalist for Team Canada. Multiple, yeah. You got 2 gold medals and then a silver, right?
Yeah, 2 gold, one gold for box and field each, and then a silver in field.
Yeah, and then
we won't talk about that one either.
We don't really talk about
yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And then just this last season switched over from the MLL to the PLL. You're on Team Chaos with them, and basically Chaos is almost Team Canada. For indoor, right?
A lot of Canada, a lot of Iroquois guys, sprinkle of some Americans in there, but yeah, a lot of box on that team.
Yeah,
for not even close to the next team that would have the most box players. It wouldn't. I think it would be at least 3 times on our roster. It's wild, but it's fun.
Yeah, and you guys had a fun little run during the bubble for the PLL, during the. Regular player, whatever, you guys kind of stunk it up a little bit, and then
100%.
and then the playoff play came coming out, and you guys did pretty well.
Yeah, I think the main thing with that was, again, I think other than the Water Dogs, obviously they're a complete new team,
right?
But I want to say that we had the most turnover of any roster from the previous year. So essentially, those round robin games, we talked about it going into it. Those games didn't matter. Every team was making the playoffs. Really, we just needed to hash things out, know how each other played, figure out the systems that we wanted to play, what we were good at, what we weren't good at.
Right.
And we did a great job of finding out what we weren't good at in those 4 games.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, we pieced it together, and we had a nice little run, and we were really 12 minutes away from winning the championship.
Yeah, I know, man.
The wheels fell off at the end.
Oh, I know. It was heartbreaking. I was watching that game. What was that like being kind of in that COVID bubble for the PLL, and then with the NLL, there's talks about doing the bubble for that league in April. Kind of tell us about what your experience was in the PLL bubble.
Yeah, I think the PLL did a great job. Obviously that was back in July, so there was still a ton of unknown. There obviously still is, but there was a ton of unknown back then about how contagious this was, how dangerous it was, and whatnot. But beforehand they had a great protocol. Before we left, we were expected to quarantine, basically just try and limit our exposure to anyone or anything for 2 weeks before we left for Utah. We had to get a test 72 hours before we traveled, and they had a lab in Utah right down the road from where the bubble was going to be. So they sent everyone in the league a test, and we had to go on a webcam in groups. So it was for my group, I think we were 8 a.m. Whatever morning it was. We had to spit in a tube in front of a medical professional. Then we had to go to UPS. That was another disaster on its own because, again, at that time there's so many unknowns and people were still so scared of this. you had to ship it, and you would go to UPS, and a lot of people had problems because it had a biohazard sticker on it.
Right.
And you would give it to the UPS people, and they're not trained in biohazard material. Like they're putting a sticker on the package and getting it on its way. So a couple people had problems where it was like, whoa, we're not touching that. we're not dealing with this. But it essentially went off without a hitch. Everyone's test got to where it needed to go. Once you got the go ahead for that, you were able to travel. Once we got to the facility or the hotel, we went directly into a conference room. So we had a whole hotel booked out. We went directly into a conference room, tested again on the spot. Then we were up in our rooms for quarantine for 24 hours until the turnaround for all the tests. And then as the test results started to come in, they were starting to release teams to go to the facility and just kind of get things set up. And then after that, we had 3-4 days of training camp, which was great, to get after it after, a few 3 or 4 months of not doing anything. So we had training camp. After training camp, we get tested one more time. And then once we were done that test, it was essentially they felt like they've created the bubble. So it was more, some of the rules got lessened a little bit. There was still a ton of protocol, but, we didn't have to wear our masks when we were around our team. Obviously in the hallways and stuff when we were with other teams, we would have to wear our masks and everything. But, yeah, we did 3 or 4 tests before, and then it was like, here's our bubble. Now we go. And then when we left, there was an option. You could either do a test before you left or you could just get out of there. I think a lot of guys signed off to not do that test because by the time we were done, it was almost a month. Oof. And by the time we were done, guys were like, I'm ready to get out of here.
Yeah, 100%. Man.
But all in all, it was an awesome experience, and I think they did a great job. And the product, you saw the social media buzz. People loved what they saw on TV. Mm-hmm. And, it was awesome lacrosse, and it was a way to give people live sports when live sports really weren't an option at the time. So I thought they did an awesome job, and
it was very innovative. Yeah. How fast they jumped on the opportunity. I mean, I give a lot of credit to the organizers for not wasting any time and jumping right into it and say we're going to make the best of a lousy situation, and sure captured the attention of a lot of people that were, but even beyond fans of the sport.
100%.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, were there positive cases while you guys were there? I mean,
no. While we were there, there was a couple beforehand.
Yeah, I heard about those. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a couple beforehand, and then teams had the option to either not have them travel, or they would do a 10-day quarantine at their home, travel to the bubble, quarantine again, get tested, and go through the medical process, and then they could enter the bubble. I think there was 2. One person. The team decided, nope, you're not coming. The other guy, they quarantined for 10 days. He came, passed the test, played. And then there was a couple beforehand who had COVID. And, and for whatever reason, I don't know exactly how it works, but they can't test negative. They couldn't test negative with this test that they were doing. So they had to come and they had to do a physical. And, again, a medical professional had to come and clear them. And one person was cleared, and another guy – his respiratory, I don't know the exact what it was, but he didn't get cleared to play. So he
brutal.
But all in all, the actual testing at the bubble, there was no positives.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, and hopefully the NLO can kind of not copy and paste what the PLL did for this upcoming shortened season, but you would think that they've got the finger on the pulse and trying to figure out what would be best for all the teams, players, everybody.
The blueprint's there, right? You've seen the PLL's done it, and obviously it's easier to do it with our leagues in the sense of it's a lot smaller, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot less players, a lot less moving parts. But the PLL's done it, the NHL's done it, the NBA's done it, the WNBA's done it, the NWHL's doing it right now. Mm-hmm. So there's a number of blueprints out there of how you can do it and do it successfully.
Yeah. Well, and I know I was on a call probably at least 3-4 months ago with some folks from the league, and kind of discussing some of those things, and it's interesting because a lot of people wouldn't know this, but they have been working with those other leagues, so the NLL and vice versa and all these other forms, they're all communicating like, hey, what are you guys doing? How are you guys doing this? What are the protocols you're trying to set in place? What's the information you're being given? How are you guys going to staff this? How are you going to manage control of things? How are, all the different aspects of it. And so it's not as if any of these leagues are just like sitting around going like, well, what are we going to do?
Right.
Mm-hmm. They're all utilizing each other. And now the interesting part I think that becomes is like, there is definitely a lot of inter-league variance based on some of the things you said, right? Which is even from looking at outdoor to indoor, right? And there's challenges that arise from that. Number of people as far as roster sizes and as you mentioned, having a hotel and all these other things that you're going to have to try and figure out how to account for. And I know especially you and I were talking about this earlier with the NLL, for example, it is a lot different when you have players that are making millions of dollars and it's their livelihood solely, that you can potentially leverage and lean on them a little bit more based on that. Whereas for us, it's not quite the same, right? And we're going to have to, figure out strategies that maybe have a little bit more creativity. And at the same time, even the NFL had players that opted out this year, right? I mean, they had guys that say, nah, I don't think I'm going to take that risk, or I'm not going to put myself in a position
guys
to be
with young families.
With young families that, I'm not going to silo myself away for that long of a time based on how difficult it's going to be from that perspective. And you have to respect that to some degree. Well, for us, it's going to be guys say, well, yeah, I can't go to a single location for an extended period of time.
Yeah, I don't have that many holidays.
Right, exactly.
The other interesting thing is going to be, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Canada just put on a new travel restriction. And if we were to go to Canada, we need to have a negative test before we travel. Then when we get there, we get tested again. Then you have to stay in a hotel for 3 days on your own dime, waiting for the results to come back. And then if you test positive there, you have to go to essentially a quarantine camp.
God.
Where you have to quarantine for 10 days or 14 days, whatever it is. And even if you go negative on all those, you still have to quarantine once you're given the okay.
Wild.
So it'll be interesting to see and obviously with the NLL, I don't know what it is. I got to think it's over 85% of the league lives north of the border, whether it's in Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, wherever it is.
Right.
You can't just expect them to come here, where it would obviously it might be a little easier to create a bubble. But then on the flip side, you got those guys who are already taking time off work, and then when they go home, they have to go through that process, and then have to quarantine 2 weeks on top of that. So whatever they would do in Canada, if they did that in the U.S., that just adds another 2 weeks on top of it all the other times. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that.
Well, speaking of things that are, NLL, PLL, MLL related, let's take this in a different direction for a second and talk about, what your thoughts are on the merger. I mean, this is big news. It's big, exciting news. It's not like any of us didn't know it was going to happen. We knew something was going to happen eventually because, although the sport's super hot in the U.S. and it's getting a lot of, fan base and people are starting to really, really enjoy watching it, it's definitely not sustainable for two pro leagues.
100%. And the other side on that was, explaining. I talked to some of my buddies who have, good friends who aren't lacrosse people, and they would ask, why are there two leagues?
Right? Oh, yeah.
And, it's like the NFL, AFL back in the day, obviously much bigger scale, but, what, you need, especially in this landscape, lacrosse needs a dominant professional sport or professional league, and I don't think there was any denying that the PLL was doing things that lacrosse hadn't seen before, not consistently on national television. Their social media was setting the standard for a lot of different people, and they were just doing things that were getting people's attention, and so I think it's good on that sense that now that there's just one league. So that everyone can pay attention to that one league and see where it goes. But on the flip side of that, I played for the Denver Outlaws. I played for a lot of MLL teams, but, Denver Outlaws most recently, that organization was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And they took care of us day in and day out. Like throughout the week, if you needed anything, they were there for you. Weekends, they made sure like it was first class. They're picking you up on in unbelievable cars. They're making sure that we're getting from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. They would work with you no matter what you had going on to get there for the weekend to play. And it sucks because a lot of those peoples don't have a job anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And then on the player side of that too, like. It was a merger, but there's only one more additional team.
Right.
And there's I can't remember how many, 6 or 7 teams in the MLL. Like there's a lot of people who just lost jobs. But I think that's a good thing in terms of it needs to be exclusive. You want the best lacrosse players playing professional lacrosse, but at the same time, there's a lot of people who were playing professional lacrosse last year that aren't going to be playing professional lacrosse this year. So I think there's a lot of good. There's some bad. And some unfortunate, but at the end of the day, I think in the long term, this is going to be a really good thing for the sport of lacrosse.
Yeah, you got to imagine that as things start to level, that there'll be expansion, there'll be some growth. Sure. I think that the one thing that you would probably agree when you look at what they've done so far, that being the PLL, is that they've been pretty strategic in how they've done things, and that it probably. Your initial thought was, well, we'll just take all those teams and lump them in, and that probably wouldn't be a very smart maneuver, right? And because there's the way that they're attacking, how they execute wouldn't really probably yield to it very well. And so, I think that you'll see them start thinking intuitively on how are they going to now take those other guys that aren't going to play, in the short term, and figure out solutions for a long-term solution. Now that they're the ones, especially looking at the outdoor game. And I think we've talked about this in lots of different circles, and that's again the question that people get. It's like, well, now you've made a small unification, but there's still the question that comes out all the time where it's, well, what do you mean? There's an indoor and an outdoor, and in that, and there's still confusion there as well. And people are like, wait a minute, so guys play both? And I think those things are really interesting, where the game needs to continue to educate, get on the, like you said, be more on a national scale and an international scale. Obviously, with U.S. and Canada being the biggest drivers within that, and making sure that has to be a message that's conveyed so that people start to understand it. Because I don't know how many times I can think back to when hockey was first introduced when I was in grad school in Nebraska, when they brought a junior team in there, right? And so all these people flooded to the stadium like, oh, heck yeah, let's go watch hockey and drink beer, right? This is going to be awesome, right? And I'll never forget that first time there's a power play, and the goalie is pounding the ice as the power play is ending, and the whole crowd starts clapping. Yeah. They thought that
they had no idea what's going on.
They had no idea what's going on. They didn't understand what's going on in the game. For those of you that maybe don't know, that's an indicator to let the defense or the rest of the team know that, hey, the power play is ending, and a little heads up, and the crowd's sitting there going, oh yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
There's an education that goes along with that, where I think you can see, especially with our fans. You look at a ton of our fans, and they're not playing lacrosse. And that's the thing that has to happen when you look at leagues that are successful. Obviously, it's easy to think of the NBA, the NHL, whatever. Those aren't people that are like, oh, let's just bring our kids. They become fans because they're a fan of the product, they're a fan of certain players and whatever else. And I think lacrosse has struggled with that a little bit, where they've tried to always cater towards, like you would assume, take Vancouver, right? Like everyone goes, oh, if you go to Vancouver, like look how many lacrosse players are there. Well, it doesn't automatically inject just thousands and thousands of fans into the seat just because it's a hotbed for lacrosse.
Well, and on the flip side of that too, they have access to all those players in the summer league,
right?
Like all the professional players are playing in the WLA. It's like, well, I could pay $40-50 to go see the Warriors play, or I can pay $10 a game and go see them play the same players playing 5 different times.
Yeah.
So
exactly,
that's another battle they're fighting too.
Yeah. So do you guys foresee in the future a partnership between the PLL and the NLL? Or do you think those will still stay kind of separate entities? Like, obviously, I don't see like a takeover, but some sort of partnership, just because, you know, you've got so many guys that play in both games. And, you know, one of the biggest initiatives for both leagues is to increase the education of the game and the reach of the game. Do you see some sort of partnership with the PLL and NLL?
I know I've got my opinions.
I don't know. Short term, I don't think so. No. But at the same time, you look at the owners in the NLL and the PL, or the investors in the PLL, right? There's like Joe Tsai's in both. So really, it would come down to
he's the owner of the San Diego team for the NLL.
He's the owner of the San Diego Seals, Brooklyn Nets, whatever else.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, and he does a ton for lacrosse.
Tons.
But honestly, if it came down to him making a decision, like we're gonna link, like I think that would happen. But I don't see anything in the foreseeable future happening. But I don't know.
I think that there's challenges there because of the fact that there is a lot of crossover, right? Mm-hmm. And you even mentioned it within the summer. And again, for anybody that maybe isn't that savvy on lacrosse as a whole, as far as the landscape goes. A huge majority of players, when the MLL and the NLL seasons are either going or in off seasons, most of those same players, including a lot of players that are, I would say, kind of like hoping to make that next step into the NLL or the MLL, are playing in summer leagues in Canada, usually in Ontario and in British Columbia. And then there's a big championship, and so you see a huge majority of those same players that are playing in those, and that was what Dillon's referring to. And in my mind, if there's going to be a relationship, I think that I could see a relationship evolve at some point there. Yeah. Because it's typically an NLL off season, and the difficulty, because as we look at it, that's been a long-standing product. You're talking decades on both ends of that. So there's structure in both of those leagues with long-standing histories, but when you look at it from a business perspective, which is where it ends up having to come from, the NLL, for example, you take, like, I can remember a few years back, Cody Jamieson tears an ACL in summer ball, and now he's out for the NLL season. And those are things where, as the game evolves and as the game grows, there's going to be a point where the amount of income that is created by the NLL or the PLL, whatever that would be, is going to reach a point where contractually they're going to have to start leveraging and protecting the right and the value of the player, and say, yeah, we can't have you play in that league if you're going to play for us, because that's a huge loss of a product who's a premier player for one of the, now they're in Halifax, but that to me is where you're going to see, like, it's going to be a tough road to hoe, because I think the development side of it's going to have to come from the summer, because we recruit from there. Like, our draft really depends a lot on all the coaches within the league going out and finding players and scouting and watching players from there. Well, at some point, that cohesion is going to, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in some fashion there, where those players become, the draftable guys. And of course, they're looking at outdoor too. So I don't know.
But I think too, on the back to that PLL, NLL partnership too, the other thing is the business models are completely different.
Yeah, they are.
100%.
NLL, you have franchises in cities. PLL, it's investors in the league. Tour-based. It's not single ownership, or it is single ownership, I guess, but it's not. Each team doesn't have their own individual owner and stuff. So,
right, but wasn't the premise that they were eventually going to go that way?
That's what I've heard. Yeah. I haven't seen anything written down or put in stone, but I would think you would need to at some point. Like, I don't think lacrosse. I don't think the PLL could build the way they want to, like continue to build the way they want to, if they continue to do the tour. And it's awesome, right? You get to get all your players in one market and do like a Final Four type weekend. Yeah. But you only get to see those guys play once a year. Yeah. So it's like, there's give and take. I think on the buzz side of it, like, it creates a buzz. And it's like, oh, they're here this weekend. Yeah. Like, let's go. We got to go. Yeah. And but long term, it's like, once you build those fan bases and you have people who cheer for the Redwoods or cheer for the Chaos and the Whipsnakes and whatever, I think you got to eventually, like, put your flag somewhere and be like, all right, the Whip Snakes are here, the Redwoods are here, the Chaos are there.
Well, I know that was like last year when, you know, they had the full tour and everything. I remember when they came to Denver, and some of my high school kids that I train, they went out and went to the game, and I remember like, well, how was it? And they were kind of like, it was awesome, but like, we didn't really know who to cheer for, right? Because of that dynamic, right? Like they were like, yeah, I mean, we saw all the best players, and that's what people want. But in order to,
but they also want to be regional,
exactly,
right? To garner to garner a fan base outside of just being fans of the game and that type of thing.
And there's nothing like geographical rivalries, right?
Yeah,
like you see it in the NLL with, you know, Toronto and Buffalo, and you know, you had Calgary and Edmonton, Calgary and Saskatchewan, right? Battle of the Prairies kind of thing. And, you know, us and Calgary, very similar cities, really dislike each other. So it's like, you know, those regional rivalries there's nothing better than that. Yeah. You know, I think.
So why do Calgary and Denver hate each other so much?
I think we just play so many times.
Yeah.
It's just,
I can't tell you how many times.
Our playoff streak against them is horrendous.
Oh boy.
But no, it's honestly, those are awesome. The Calgary, you always know the Calgary Colorado games are going to be 1-2 goals.
It used to be back in the day, like whenever the Red Wings played the Avalanche.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
It's going to be a bloodbath.
There's blood in the water.
It's like that.
Yeah. Regional. Like that. The regional. Our geographical rivalries are awesome.
Yeah.
Like it's just even our game. I think we only played Calgary once last year, but it was their banner. Like they won the championship. It's banner raising. You know, there's a buzz in the arena. The crowd. It's a huge crowd.
Yeah.
And
Saddle Dome's huge.
Yeah. And we beat them in overtime, and it was just like back and forth, low scoring game.
Yeah.
Beating the wheels off each other. Like it was those are the games that you get every time we play each other, and those geographical. You know, I like a lot of guys' teams.
Yeah.
Like I'm in communication with a lot of guys, but once we're inside the boards and we're playing, I have a Colorado jersey on, they have a Calgary jersey on. Like I don't give a shit about that.
Oh yeah. There's plenty of that, and it's funny that you mentioned that because like I'm the same way. You know, I've been. I don't even know how many times now. You know, in over a decade with the team, it's like the amount of times I've done that trip and been to Calgary and in the Saddle Dome and you know playoff game atmospheres and like I think historically like we went back and did some kind of research on that, like he said, like 1 or 2 games. Like I think in the last like 10 years our goal differential is literally 1.
I would almost be willing to put my house on that. We go to overtime with Calgary at least once a year.
Yeah, we had a stretch there where in like a 2-season, you know, between regular season and playoff, we went to overtime like 3 or 4 times with them.
Really, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's always fun.
Yeah.
Well, while we're on the subject of things that are regional in nature,
right.
I was hoping to, you know, give the listeners some insight to how you feel about sort of the state of. You know, the state of the high school sport in Colorado. You know, coming from your background, being raised in Canada, going to play D1 ball at Bellarmine and everything else, like, you know, you're now, you know, you've been the head coach at East High School down here in Denver for a while. Why don't you just give us some insight as to how you feel about, like, how the game is evolving, you know, its popularity, its growth, you know, and you know, just basically your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, you know, Colorado lacrosse is getting better every year. And, you know, when I was growing up, like, I didn't even know, like, except for the University of Denver, I didn't know, and the Colorado Mammoth, I didn't know anything about Colorado lacrosse. And, you know, you're seeing kids getting recognition on the national level. You see in college, like Asher Nolteen at High Point, Richie Connell, guy that Joel trained, continues to train down at Richmond, had an awesome freshman year. Yeah. Obviously, there's countless guys at the University of Denver. But it's just on that national stage, it's growing. And then in the high school ranks, you're seeing, you know, Cherry Creek and Kent and some of these top programs are being recognized in these national polls year in and year out. So I think the growth of lacrosse in the state is awesome. Mm-hmm. I think there's still a long way to go. And I think the issue with Colorado right now is that the sport at the high school rank is it's too top heavy, right? There isn't enough. I don't think there's enough. Like it's
parity.
There's not enough parity. It's always the same teams at the top.
Yeah.
Right. Like maybe you mix in like I know Brent Adams, Coach Highlands Ranch. They got into the Final Four one year, but you know usually you see Regis, Kent, Cherry Creek. the Arapahoe. Like those 4 teams are year in and year out usually in the Final Four. And I think, Colorado needs to get more parity. And you're seeing it. You're seeing, like, even with fall ball this year, obviously it fall ball really doesn't mean much. You're just trying to get your guys out there and playing. Sure. But you see Vista and Valor come on the scene. They have great fall seasons. But I think, for the sport to continue to grow, I think you need success at more programs. And I think, as the sport is growing and you're seeing it on the club side with more clubs and more competitive clubs, I think you're going to see that in the high school ranks. But I think it's heading in the right direction. And the top lacrosse in Colorado is high-level lacrosse. There's no doubt about that.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because in the last 8 to 10 years now, you are getting pretty consistent with the fact that there's always 1 or 2 kids that come out of Colorado, and it's always a big deal when you go, oh, hey, so-and-so signed with DU,
Right.
DU obviously being a top-tier team, and the emergence of everything that's happened there since, the early 2000s of that program to winning a national championship. It's like that helps breed younger players now that are close enough to see that level of lacrosse that go, man, I want to play there someday. And it may not end up being them playing for DU. They may end up going to other places, like
Mesa's got a great Division II program, and CC and Pueblo. There's a lot of great options in Colorado. Even like CU Boulder, awesome club program. CSU up north. Like there's, even in the state of Colorado, there's some awesome options to go play college lacrosse, even if it's not at DU.
Do you feel like at all that the Colorado kids get overlooked on the national stage from a recruiting standpoint? I mean, and you can speak to that, based on your own journey that you had with recruiting.
Yeah, I think it's tough because, again, there's no one's going to question the best lacrosse, high school lacrosse in the nation is Maryland and New York. It's just the way it is, and a lot of those the top college programs are on the East Coast, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, D.C., up through New York, in the Northeast. They have so much talent in their market. There isn't really a huge need for them to branch out and go after these kids that aren't in the market, right? Because then you need, one way or the other. Either Colorado kids have to go to the East Coast, which is usually the case, for showcases and club tournaments and what have you, or the college coaches come out here. And obviously lacrosse isn't a revenue generating sport at 99% of the universities in college lacrosse. So I don't think that a lot of them would have the budget to come out here consistently to see these kids and watch them play. But I think we're getting there. I think you look at rosters and you see rosters with more diverse geographical diversity, right? You see a lot of Texas kids, California, Colorado, Florida. Like it is growing, but I think it's still just such an East Coast dominated sport. So until the high school ranks and the club level ranks start generating players at that level, and again, you look at the MIAA, they have a ton of teams that compete every year, and you're playing awesome games week in and week out. Until Colorado kind of has more of that kind of landscape, I think it's going to stay that way, and kids not in the East Coast are just going to have to work a little bit harder, or that much harder, to get the looks and to get the respect for schools to take a chance on them or give them a scholarship opportunity.
So talk a little bit about what that was like for you.
Yeah, it was. So I grew up in Orangeville, huge lacrosse hotbed. Brody Merrill, Chris Sanderson, Jeremy Noble, Jason Noble, myself, Josh Sanderson, the whole Sanderson clan. I have a huge history of lacrosse, and growing up, when I was going through the high school ranks, went to the Hill Academy, very well-known prep school in just north of Toronto. When I was going through the recruiting process, it was still U.S. schools were basically just looking for goal scorers, because that's what Canadians were known for. It was get a guy, we'll park him in front of the net, he'll catch the ball, he'll put it in the net consistently. That's what we want, that's what we know. And that's because, up until I went to the Hill, I was only playing field lacrosse for 3 weeks of the year. We didn't have any club programs. Our field lacrosse season was from, I want to say, the month of April, or the middle of April, up until we call it May long weekend, but like Memorial Day.
Yeah.
So we were playing like 3-4 weekends. I was playing 12 field lacrosse games a year, up until grade 11. So I didn't know any better. I didn't know like I didn't know I wanted to play in college, and then I saw like some guys from my hometown go, and guys in the junior ranks that I watched play go, and I was like, oh, maybe I want to do that.
Yeah.
And the Hill Academy starts up, and I get some great opportunity to play there. But still, like, the recruiting process for me, I would email schools, and I didn't know any better. I didn't know anything about the recruiting process. My parents weren't college athletes. People that I grew up with, we didn't have any college athletes, so we didn't really know what was going on. So I get to the Hill and start playing for Edge, which started up my junior year as well, club program. And I'm just like emailing people out like, hey, I play for this program, yada, yada, yada. I'm interested. And back then, like, I was the best player in my age group, and always played on the best teams. Like I was always like, one of the better players, and I was like, okay, I'm one of the best. I'm only going to play high-end Division I lacrosse. So I'm only emailing Virginia, Cornell, Syracuse, Johns Hopkins. Like, I'm only emailing these top programs because I'm ignorant and I don't know any. Like, no one's told me like, hey, like there's a lot of options out there.
Yeah.
And when I was getting calling, so I would get calls back and they'd be like, yeah, we're interested, but we also have this kid that we're probably going to sign, and if we sign him, that's going to change everything. And I actually did a recruiting trip. I had a weekend. I did one day at Hobart, and I was going to do a stay over. So Friday at Hobart, Saturday, Sunday at Cornell. And I did Hobart, had a great experience, loved it. On my way to Cornell, I'm driving. I get an email from Jeff Tambroni, who was coaching in Cornell at the time. Says, hey, excited to have you this weekend. Just so you know, we committed a goalie, AJ Fiore. He was a 4-year starter for them. We committed him. That's going to change our recruiting process with you. Essentially saying like, we don't have room for you anymore.
Yeah.
So I like tell this to my parents. My parents are like, all right, do you still want to go? I was like, man, let's just go home. So I just went home. And then like Virginia, same thing. We're not putting a goalie in that class. Hopkins, we're not putting a goalie in that class. Syracuse, yeah, sure, come on down. You can come play here, but we have no money for you. And like we couldn't afford to pay Syracuse $30,000 a year. It just wasn't the way that it worked. And I actually did get a lot of letters from like mid-major programs. Like I remember specifically getting one from Rutgers. I was like, not for me. Like I'm only going top. And like looking back at it, I'm thinking, I'm like, what was I doing? Like, and like I'm telling these kids now is like make a list, make a huge list.
Yeah, cast the net wide.
Exactly. Yeah. Because there's so many kids trying to play college lacrosse. Like you can't be unless you're one of those top 20 kids who can choose where they want to go. Yeah. You really don't have a choice where you're going to go to school, right? Like there's only so many options. So. Yeah. The way I actually ended up getting recruited to Bellarmine was I was doing a red shirt, or not a red shirt year. We call it a victory lap or a post-grad. Yeah. So I was doing a post-grad year back at my local high school, and the Team Canada men's tryouts were that fall for the 2010 World Championships, the men's team. And I guess there was an injury, and I get a call 2 nights before, like, hey, do you want, like, we need to fill a spot. Do you want to come out? And I was like, absolutely. What an opportunity. Yeah. So I'm 18 years old at the World, like, Team Canada's training camp. Jeff Schneider's in his prime. You got Matt Brown out there, the associate head coach in Denver.
Yeah. Brownie.
John Grant Jr., Gavin Prout, like, Sean Williams, like all these dudes that I've like grown up watching play. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing here? And
just a handful of Hall of Famers.
It was like Mark Stein, like Garrett Billings, Mark Stein. I roomed with Garrett Billings. I didn't say a word in the hotel room. Like I just sat there. I'm like, what? Like I don't know anyone. Like I'm not going to say anything. The only person I really knew was Brody Merrill and a couple guys I played junior with, like Stephen Keogh was there and a couple other guys. But
Keogh.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So I go there. I have a great experience. Played pretty well, and I get a call from Stony Brook because Kevin Crowley was at Stony Brook at the time. He was like, hey, I heard you had an awesome weekend. We want you to come, but we want you to finish your post-grad year and come the following fall. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's like really my only look at the time. I'm like, that's awesome. This was in about October. And I have a few conversations with, it was Rick Soule. He was the head coach there. I have a few conversations with him. Loved it. Great experience, great guy. I was ready to go to Stony Brook. And then I get a DM from a guy from my hometown, Matt Campbell. He was at Bellarmine at the time. He's like, hey, I just told our coach about you. He wants you to come in January. Or sorry, he had just graduated, but he's like, he wants you to come in January. And I'm like, well, that's awesome, because I was done with high school at the time. Like, I'm not, like, I was going to, like, boost a couple grades, but, like, I was just so checked out. I was just there to be there. And I get a call from the Bellarmine coach at the beginning of December. It's like, we want you to come. We aren't sold on our goalie right now. Like, you have the chance.
We won't name names there.
You'll have a chance to play right away. And then as soon as he said that, I was like, I'm in. Yeah. And then, you know, my parents and coach Jack McGetrick talk numbers and everything. First calls at the beginning of December. I'm enrolled in classes in January 2nd. Wow. Like, it was. Wow. I never went to Louisville. Yeah. I never saw the school. I just said, screw it. This is a chance to play Division I lacrosse. I jumped at it, and I had a blast. For 4 years.
That sounds a lot like me, actually. I signed my whatever NLI or any of that stuff. Like, it was June. It was like June or July going into what would be an August start to my like freshman year of college. Yeah. And it's because, number one, I was completely ridiculously had no clue about the recruiting process. I didn't understand it. Right. And so as all these letters and things are coming in, I'm like, oh, okay, cool, throw that aside. Oh, okay, cool, throw that aside. I had no idea what I was doing. And next thing I know, I'm like, I'm supposed to go to college like next fall.
I'm supposed to go to college in 3 weeks. I better make up my mind.
Yeah, and all of a sudden I finally get an offer, and I'm like, wait a minute, I better do this sooner or later. And next thing you know, it was a done deal. So
if you could take it all, like if you could go back again and do this from the start and give like your high school kids or juniors coming up, or parents that have kids that, have that dream of looking out there and wanting to do it, what would you have done differently, or what advice would you give to them?
Looking back at it, I wouldn't have said no to anyone. Like, at least I would have at least had I would have at least had the conversation with them and gone through the process just to see, what can you guys offer me? What do your program? What programs does your school have? Obviously, that's a huge one, because if it doesn't have the program you want, then you're kind of like, what's the point, anyways? Like, what can you offer me? What programs does your school offer?
What'd you get your degree in?
Communications.
Oh, okay.
And then. I would just go through the process and see what each of these schools had to offer, and then once I got through that, then I would narrow it down, rather than being like, this is it, these are the programs I'm going after, because again, it just doesn't work out like that. And at the end of the day, it's a business, right? Like, one thing that I don't think a lot of these parents understand is that these scholarships are all 1-year deals, right? Like, they can promise you the world. But let's just say after your freshman year, let's say your grades aren't great, or you didn't play at the level that they were kind of hoping you to play for, they can take money from you at any point. And then you're kind of out in the cold, and you got to figure it out. So it's like, it's a business, and it sucks because, these are kids that you're dealing with, and it's supposed to be their college experience. But you also need to look at it like it's a business, because you need to make sure that you're making the right decision for you, you're making the right decision for your family, you're making the right decision financially, right? You're setting yourself up for life after lacrosse, because, again, there's very limited amount of professional lacrosse players that can do lacrosse full time.
Even more now.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So it's like you just got to make sure that you're casting your net as wide as you possibly can. You don't say no to anyone right off the bat. You listen to what everyone has to say, what they can offer you, and then you narrow it down and make the best decision for you. So that'd be if I could go back, that's how I would do it, and that's what with my high school kids, that's how I kind of tell them to navigate the waters.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely true. I mean, firsthand experience with that for sure. But that is the type of thing that we get asked a lot too, and just as even as strength coaches, and with Joel and Scotty obviously working with you at the Mammoth, and myself coaching some lacrosse kids as well, and having one of my boys go through the process as well, as they were like, okay, well, if you had to go back and do it again, what would you do differently? Spot on. I couldn't agree with you more. First of all, you never say no to anybody, and second of all, you also have to be, I think, to a certain amount, sort of, I hate to use the term realistic, but don't set the bar of expectation ridiculously high in this climate, especially right now.
Yeah.
If you look at how many, so for example, how many fifth years transferred just this year, how many fifth years opted to take their fifth year? I mean, what's the size of the roster Denver's going to be carrying next year?
Well, this year they're almost
75.
I think I actually made the squad too. I'm on there too.
Checked
somehow.
His eligibility.
I want to say they're at like 67, which is astronomical.
Jesus Christ.
I mean,
it used to be 35.
And so you got to think about it from the standpoint of, okay, do you want to go to this school because it's a Division I school and it's a name and it's a power?
Yeah.
Or do you want to go to college to play lacrosse?
Yeah.
And if you can't, that I think is a pretty key piece, because there's a lot of these kids. I mean, even Bill said it a few years ago when he was speaking to us, Bill Tierney, about the concept of coaches recruiting players to their squad so somebody else wouldn't pick them up. And that was the first time I ever heard that. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, what do they do? He says they park them on the bench. They never get to play. Now you look at the landscape where you're coming into close to a 70-man roster as a freshman. Do you really think you're going to be playing in year one?
Or year two.
Yeah.
Probably not. Right? So there goes, 2 years that you would have had an opportunity to play. And that's where, you were talking about like those middle tier or emerging Division I, Division II, and the Division III programs. The Division III programs are incredible. I mean, they're really, really good teams. Some of those NESCAC schools that have Division III programs
very high lacrosse.
They're really good.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at rosters. Look at PLL and NLL rosters.
Yeah.
Like, it's not filled full of guys that come out of Hopkins.
You do.
And
Yeah.
I mean, they're there.
Yeah.
Right.
But I promise you're going to find a boatload of guys where you're like, where'd they go to school?
Yeah.
Well,
what's the name of that school?
You look at the best face-off guy in the PLL last summer, Joe Nardella, went to Rutgers, right? Like, not a bad program.
Yeah.
But it's not Maryland or Hopkins or anything like that.
Right.
Blaze Riordan played at Albany.
Right. Right.
You go down the list of like high level players that aren't in those blue chip programs. And I think the other problem with kids too is that they're so quick to commit, and I think they kind of put themselves into a jam where you see how many, like you were mentioning, like the fifth years transferring, how many freshmen transfer after their freshman year going into their sophomore year because they're expected to commit as a junior in high school. When I was in junior high school, I didn't know what I wanted to study. Right? Like you have to know.
I love these life decisions that you make when
you're 16 years old.
I thought I was going to be a cop.
I thought you were.
You look like one. But
You're not?
No.
Like you have to know what you want to do to study. You have to essentially know what you want to do for a career when you're 16. And then you commit as a junior, and then all of a sudden you get there as a freshman. Maybe things don't go the way you planned, or a coach leaves. You don't like the program, like your home, it's too far away or something. Whatever it is, like all of a sudden now you're in the transfer portal, and you gotta make a decision to go somewhere else, right? Like, and then on the flip side of that, I think the other problem too is that lacrosse isn't fully funded. College lacrosse, right? Like there's only a very limited amount of scholarships out there, and the coaches they it goes back to being a business. They have to do this, but they put timelines on the offers. Like, hey, we have X amount of money for you. You have 48 hours to make a decision, or we're moving on.
Right.
And it's tough. Again, it's a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old, however old these kids are. But they also don't have, like football, they don't have 50 scholarships to hand out to these kids. Like they need to know what they're doing with their money. They need to be strategic with it. Like it's like, is this kid's GPA good enough? Can we get him academic money so we don't have to burn our scholarship? Like what do those things look like? And I think, at the end of the day, it's just so hard for 16-year-olds to know what they want to do. And you just see how many kids are transferring after their freshman year.
Yeah. That's really good advice, man. And we'll kind of start to wrap it up here. But what we want to do is do the Fast Five. And what the Fast Five are is we give you 5 words that starts with F, like good words, not bad words. And we just kind of riff and go from there. So the first one that I have for you is fast break. So we know that like Joey and Gillis are always willing to head down and go for a fast break. But if there was a defenseman on the Colorado Mammoth that you would love to see go on a fast break, who would that be?
Ooh, this is such a good question.
Johnny Lentz.
Yeah,
Johnny Lentz.
I was thinking Johnny or Carnes.
Yeah,
they essentially plant roots in the defensive end.
Yeah, if you look at the bottom of their shoes, they're a little brown. It's mainly because they just stay at home.
They're not.
Their feet get pretty ganky.
They're not going across center a whole. I think Carnes more so than Lentz are going across center. But those guys are true. They're awesome, but they are true stay-at-home defensemen.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, the second one that I have for you is your favorite post-game food on the road. So, we've got...
we have the best,
tough.
So
it's
like...
We have the best, but it's tough. It's a tough...
You're talking about in locker room?
In locker room.
It's always pizza, too. And,
right.
Vancouver sucks. Calgary sucks.
Sass
sucks.
Yeah.
Airing it out. Here we go.
Yeah, out of all the terrible choices, what's your favorite?
I honestly don't know what I would choose. What was our spread in Vegas? Didn't they have like a decent spread there? Like, wasn't that real food? No, it was pizza again.
Yeah, it's always pizza.
It's always pizza.
Yeah.
All right, well then let's take that in a different direction and say, what is your favorite food?
Well, we get Brothers Barbecue full spread in our locker room.
Huge spread.
And you get pulled pork, ribs. Yeah. You get all the fixing. It's awesome. The ribs are gone like that.
Yeah.
Those are the best. But the pulled pork and the shredded beef are pretty fire too. It's awesome.
All right.
We treat ourselves.
Yeah.
We do.
Next one is flight. What's your favorite flight and airport? We're getting to the airport early in the morning.
Airline?
No, just like flight in general.
Airline's easy. It's United.
Yeah,
I have status with them.
Dude, they're like, oh, Mr. Ward.
Yeah.
They roll out the red carpet, man. It's embarrassing. Like I feel like a peasant every time I'm flying with this guy.
I
to the back of the bus,
there.
Scotty.
But the best airport, it's got to be Sask. Like you're there 5 minutes before your flight, and you're checked in through security.
Interesting.
There, like it's so easy.
I don't know.
Where is this? Saskatoon?
It's Saskatoon. It's like it's just so small.
Yeah.
It's like the
Buffalo.
Saskatoon, airport / convenience
It's
store.
only
It's got a gas station.
It's only called
flea market.
international because there's a flight to Minnesota.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. There you go.
I think that might be it.
Yeah.
I think there's a flight to Arizona.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
It's going to Arizona from
But
Sask.
everyone,
Anybody that can get out of there.
Literally
Get out of
everyone.
Saskatoon.
But,
Sask is an interesting town, though. We won't get into
I
that.
like Sask.
I like
It's kind of
Sask.
a cool little town.
Buffalo's airport's nice too. Again,
Yeah.
it's so small.
Yeah, I like that little
Hit
restaurant.
up Anchor Bar, get a couple beers.
Come
and,
on, you got. What about Minnesota, man?
I hate it. It's so big. I do I like it in the sense that it's like super nice and
I was thinking the PGA store and all
yeah,
that.
I love golf.
We've had some good times.
I hate that
we
place.
Do. Yeah, I know you do. We've had some good times at the Minnesota airport, but when I'm traveling, I just want to get there, get through, get on the plane, and get out of there. I don't want to spend time. But if you're saying where would you want to be delayed, it's Minnesota. Hands down.
Yeah.
Without
Lots of room for activity.
I tell you, a place I can't stand when it comes to that now is Calgary's airport. It is
So
such.
big,
It's
right?
huge.
You need a freaking be able to rent a golf cart there because
They have them.
It's so enormous to get
Really?
anywhere takes
It's
forever.
just spread out. And even when we're flying, when we're flying out, that hallway, we fly out at 6 a.m. and 6 a.m.
Yeah.
That hallway we have to walk down to get to the very
dude.
last gate.
It's like
There's no other
1,200
flights.
yards away.
Yeah.
down.
It's literally like a quarter mile.
There's no other
I think,
flights. And it's all right, we're going to put this first flight of the day at the last.
Yeah.
I
I want to say I timed it or measured it on my watch, and it was like a quarter mile from
It's
where that
far.
McDonald's is to
It's
it's
far.
down.
It's a
man.
hike. It's a hike.
And they're never preprepared
No.
in the morning for our team, and I don't blame them because
Who
again,
could be prepared for
yeah,
us?
yeah. We're a pretty ragtag looking crew at 4 a.m.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But yeah, my favorite airport's got to be Buffer Sass just because of how convenient it is.
Yeah, okay.
Favorite airport to be delayed at would be Minnesota.
All right.
No questions
Yeah.
asked.
Number 4.
Number 4, favorite chirp. So what's your favorite chirp to, like, if you've got somebody's number and you're just blocking everything? Like,
Honestly, I try to stay pretty quiet when I'm playing
yeah.
because that flip can switch pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't want to give anyone more fuel to score than they already have.
Yeah.
So when I'm actually playing, I stay pretty quiet. But when I'm on the bench, if I'm on the bench, I'm going at everyone and anyone.
Yeah.
Favorite chirp? I don't know if I have like a favorite one. I just kind of like let it fly.
No go-to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No
whatever the game needs from me, I'll give it to him. But yeah, when I'm playing, I'm pretty quiet and I just kind of go about my business.
All right. Last one. Forget about it or for it. # trade Ward.
Oh wow! Scotty did some planning here.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
all right.
I was going through like the Mammoth Twitter, like when you.
This is a hot topic every year. It's so funny.
I love it.
like whenever you're
Speaking
featured
of chirps,
on Twitter and on Instagram, like it's guaranteed you're gonna see a # trade Ward. Like where did that start, man?
So I can't remember the guy's name, but he hates me. And for those of you who obviously, for those of you who don't know what this is, it's the Mammoth have a very cult following.
Yep.
And their
Yes, they do.
fans are very passionate, and they know the game pretty well because the game's been around for a decent amount of time now. But there are a few fans. I have a pretty good fan base who have my back and support me. But there's a handful out there that would rather me not play ever again.
Yeah. And what's funny too is like even other guys like on other teams, like other players are in on it too. Like I'll see
they'll
them
lean into it.
Yeah.
And but I think it's great because first off it's generating it's generating content on social media.
Absolutely.
People. I always love, I'll give it a retweet or I'll give it a like. And, I'll repost it because, again, it's just if people are so passionate about me not playing anymore, I must be I can't remember who said it, but people don't boo nobodies.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's
I
good.
love that quote. And, I love that I've gotten to a point in my playing career where I've gotten to a point where people are like, this guy stinks, when clearly I don't.
Right.
I love it.
You've had some stinkers.
I 100% have had some stinkers. My last game I played was a stinker.
But your body of work is pretty solid.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I love it. I
God,
I
that's
want more of
hilarious.
it, and I get a kick when people and players and fans of other teams are like, yeah, please trade Ward.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
We would love
Well,
that.
we actually need to figure out a way to carry that over to the PLL so we can get you on the field and actually onto the broadcast
Yeah.
rather than on the sidelines. So
Sweet.
we need to start trade Ward.
Yeah.
# trade Ward in the PLL. And see if we can get you on the field.
Yeah.
I think I've seen it.
Have stick will travel.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, thanks again for coming on, Dillon. It was super fun to have you on. I'm sure we're going to do this again. I know all 4 of us can talk lacrosse all day and
Yeah, we could turn this into an afternoon, thing.
afternoon. Yeah.
Coffee hour,
Yeah.
little happy hour.
Happy hour with Dillon
Happy
Ward.
hour. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
All right, guys.